And we are live. Folks, welcome to a ZineQuest 3 Fireside Chat. I have with me Nathan Town, who is doing the 13th Fleet Zine. Did I get it right? Yes, I finally got.
The second time you got it right.
Holy, yeah. Geez, by the time I finish doing this at the end of the month, maybe I'll actually have it right. I won't be that goddamn New Yorker.
Yeah, it's a New York thing. It's a New York thing, is it?
It must be.
Is it because you have all those corner side magazine stands?
Yes, well, I actually don't have any magazine stand anymore. They've gone the way of the dodo bird. Let's have bookstores. God help me. But listen, I'm glad to have you with me finally.
Yeah,
we had a hiccup last week. I would have had my issue would have been my cat probably had caused the damage. Your issue was Windows, which Windows and cats are pretty much damn close to being the same thing at this point. Yeah,
I'm just happy it's done. God, and happy to be here.
So as I've been asking most of the creators I've been sitting down with, when did you come into the hobby and how did you find role playing?
Well, for me, like I've got on the campaign page, I started with the Air Lotus Red Box basic set.
Okay.
And that was when I would have been 8 or 9. So you're looking at 40 plus years. And I've just gone through all of it, all the way through. I mean, once you start getting into D&D, and then once you realize, like, wait a minute, what's an illusionist? And you start getting into AD&D way back in the time.
I started with AD&D because
I was
babies.
Well, I was a baby, so
I was 12. I wasn't much older than you were. But you got that snobbiness back then in the early 80s. I was like, Dungeons and Dragons. If it's basic, how good can it be?
Hey, Basic didn't have alignment languages, so it had that going for it for sure.
It didn't have alignment languages. It only had 3 alignments as opposed to the 9. That was just way too fucking many for what anybody needed. No, I think Basic was actually a better presentation of the rules. Oh, excuse me. But I don't think it actually... I think AD&D was more marketing, and the idea of making it advanced was to make it elite. And I was a dumb youth, and I fell for that.
Yeah, well, spoken like a true OSR guy, for sure.
Yeah, well.
But there's a local convention here in Manitoba, Canada, called PrairieCon, and you would go to that every year, sometimes twice a year, religiously, and you would enter in the D&D tournament, but you would try out any other game you possibly could, and it's just been a saturation all these decades. That I mean, that's where all the sources came from. For the longest time, any of my friends were like degrees of Kevin Bacon. They were 1 degree at the most away from PrairieCon, either somebody I met there or a friend of that. It's changed. I mean, I've gotten older. Things are different, right. But that's how it was for a good chunk of time, for sure. Convention.
See, for me, growing up, I spent my summers in the Poconos because my grandfather had a house out there. So I had my summer / occasionally weekend gaming group in the early 80s. And then I had my home gaming group, which was friends from high school. Because although I got introduced younger, I didn't really lock into a group until my high school years. And that high school group lasted through college, lasted until 97. So it lasted a good number of years. We still get together. COVID, when we're not in the world of COVID, we get together once a year and hang out and do the adult things of drinking and playing Xbox and watching stupid videos on YouTube, because that's what adults do.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's still, I still know the phone number of the high school gang we were playing with. So
there you go.
It's pretty tight.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, like, the connections that you make through gaming, even connections that as an adult, adulting with my gaming, most of my adult gaming has either been at conventions or as VTTs. Even though I live in New York City, finding physical groups that play the games that you want to play isn't always convenient.
Exactly. Well, as we get older, I mean, every gamer is different, but there is that spread between wargaming, crunch, and
Yep.
something like fiasco that's just pure storytelling. And everybody's different where they're comfortable in there, and their comfort changes from time to time. I mean, sometimes I like just the straight storytelling aspect, and sometimes I'll be sitting at a table moving minis around, even though I lose every single time because I keep making choices for story-based reasons that don't really exist. But everybody's in there somewhere.
I've been there, and as I've stated in the past, even when I use the VTT, me and mini use doesn't really work too well. Tim Shorts, I'm sure, could tell you as a player, I'm always the one that everyone's like, Eric, did you fall asleep? No, come on, I'm involved. Your pog is still on the bottom of the screen. You got to catch up with the rest of us, because I don't think minis. I didn't come into gaming as a war gamer. I didn't come into gaming. I guess some of the current generation have come in with VTTs. I found VTTs when I returned to gaming, and it was more of the use a pointer to show where you were. So I'm not geared into minis, even though I think the pogs are cool. I really like them, and I'll buy the digital assets and never use the shit. So
there's a lot of people who don't have a hot clue what you mean when you say pogs. So you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, pog.
Anybody
like
younger than 20,
polywogs?
Yeah,
like polywogs? No, not polywogs.
So
these are like virtual tokens, I should say.
Yeah. Eric, where are you on the spectrum of crunch to storytelling? Where's your comfort zone these days? Because it changes as we get older.
It does change. When I was younger, I came in with AD&D 1E, and I thought, although I thought that was quote the shit, I loved the rule systems, so Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Rollmaster, MERP, the original Pacesetter games, Paranoia. I would run them all. I would learn the rules and be rip-roaring, ready to go. And I stepped away from gaming for a number of years. And the first game I played when I came back was via Fantasy Grounds 2, and it was Dark Heresy, the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 40K. And thank God that, there was the rule set for Fantasy Grounds had the tables built in for all your rolls. So it was light because I wasn't running it. Yeah. Then I tried Castles and Crusades, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. It feels a lot like what I used to play. And as a player, my tolerance or my acceptance of crunch is a lot higher. I'm more than happy to play in games that I am not fully immersed in the rules, because if I have a question, I have a table full of people that can fill in the blanks and run with it. So at conventions, I'm happy to play games that, I haven't played Time Master since must be like 1993.
Yeah, but if you're running the show, that crunch can kill you, though.
And listen again, you're talking to the person that wrote Swords and Wizardry Light, where I looked at something like Swords and Wizardry and said, wow, even this is too much to, in my opinion, bring somebody into the game comfortably. You want to lower that bar, yet still give the experience. And I used to be a huge fan of quick starts, because they were always a great way. If I wanted to learn Savage Worlds, you get the quick start and you learn. But what you didn't learn is advancement. You didn't learn what it was to see a character get a little bit more powerful, which is why when I was doing Swords and Wizardry Light, I'm like, leveling's got to be here, but I don't want experience points, because, besides the fact that it'll probably take me 2 pages to explain the leveling process with experience points, it turns the game into math.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is turn an introduction of anything into a math experience. So I had, for the most part, 2 people in mind when I was working on it. My niece, who was 5 at the time, and was just excited about anything Dungeons and Dragons related. And my wife, Rachel, who goes to conventions with me, and she games, but she's not a gamer outside of going to conventions with me. And she's legally blind, so she doesn't really spend time reading rule books. I said, how do I get a game that you can learn? You can be given the rules, and that's great. You can learn them quickly, but you don't even really have to read them, because the mechanics are so damn simple. the D20 is a D6. You're not going to get confused between the D10 and the D8, and the D12 and the D20. Everything is quick and easy. So my tolerance for crunch as a GM is much less. So as I discussed on an earlier fireside, I will buy rules for a lot of different games, but the only rule sets that have really struck me in the last couple of years that warrant OSR, because the OSR is it's already built into my genetics. I can pick up an OSR rule set. Faraway Land.
You're going to say Alan stuff too, aren't you?
Well, I'm going to say Alan stuff with Tiny D6, but the first game I found that spoke to me that wasn't quote OSR, but has a lot of the OSR feel to it was Faraway Land.
Yeah.
Faraway Land. I was like, it's a simple mechanic, yet it's still a deep game. It runs well, and I don't need to figure out how powers work in Savage Worlds, which I still don't understand, and I've tried desperately to understand. So I love the support material for it. And I no longer have the patience to learn GURPS like I did when I was in my 20s.
For sure.
So
I had a friend actually who said, remember when we were kids? Remember when you would get your new first ed hardcover supplement or your second ed hardcover, and you would just devour that thing front to back and take. And now, like, I have not read through fifth ed. I'm kind of winging it when I run it because I like rule books should be fun to read, and sometimes they just aren't. My tolerance for it is low.
Yeah, no, I again, I would gladly play in a 5th edition campaign as a player. I played in the D&D Next back into Friends and Family. That's how like my online gaming group formed, and I made some really good connections from that. The only problem with that was it was frustrating, not just for our GM, but for the players, because it was a beta test, and it was almost like a stress test, and not, I mean literally, because the rules would change every 2 weeks or so. You get a new version of the rules that you had to read, and a lot of times it would go from something that felt very old school to something that felt very 4E, and then something that felt like neither. And I was frustrated as a player, but really I think the frustration came out with our GM, because every 2 weeks he had to relearn rules to the point that he was fluent enough to keep the game moving.
Yeah.
And that was not the easiest. And I'm a big proponent in that you should know the rules, especially if you're going to a convention game. Maybe it's different at your home table. Your players are more understanding. You're all learning it. But you go into a convention game, your GM better know those rules, because you've taken the time to go to a convention. You've paid your money. You don't want the DM going, yeah, okay, that anybody know what page that rule is on? Let me find it. You take a bathroom break, because I looked that up.
Yeah,
no.
I gotta say, fifth ed kind of feels like that process, that traveling tale rule making process. There's less structure to it than, say, Pathfinder or 3.5. It seems a little bit more all over the place sometimes, and just you describing your next experience kind of illustrates that. I feel that they were trying different things out. For sure.
Well, they were, and I mean, in a way, I look back at first edition D&D, and it's a hodgepodge of rules. I look at it as somebody who's been gaming now for 40 years, and I'm like, all right, so you have a system that's basically based on a D20, because everything you do is a D20 for your saves, for your combat, except if you're in unarmed combat, in which case we're going to use some weird percentile system with a table full of adjustments. It's like, huh? But we do. Now let's add psionics in, which has nothing. It's like rock, paper, scissors. Like,
I think I've still got an old 1E character that has the weapon versus armor class written out. Oh. I'm like, what is this?
and what's funny with that was I remember looking at that and going, all right, because initially it was, you got to play by the book. You got to use segment. You got to use spell interruption if you hit. You got to use weapon versus AC adjustments and weapon speed. Still, weapon speed we just fucked up. We could not figure out weapon speed. Just don't understand. So you're telling me that there's an instance, but only if you tie initiative, where a dagger can strike 3 times before a two-handed sword? I go, I don't even find that in the rules, but I'm sure it's there because people have told me. So we wound up house ruling 1E to cut out and jettison stuff that we just didn't understand or didn't think it was worth the time to invest in. And I'm like, why would you even put that into the rules now? But back then, it was like, again, the idea of, well, we're going to go from a basic game to an advanced game. And the advanced game needs to have all of this to make it advanced. And so that's why I look at, like, Osric, and it's like, well, I would gladly play AD&D 1E as a player using my Player's Handbook and my Unearthed Arcana. But if I was going to GM it again, since I no longer have all the rules memorized, because when we were kids, you had all the goddamn rules memorized.
You had the page numbers down. It was nuts.
Oh, my God. But I used to have the, what was it, for 2nd edition, you had the box set of the quizzes, where you'd pull random cards out, and it'd be like, so what level spell is Prismatic Sphere?
You had a 2nd edition Trivial Pursuit game?
Yeah.
Shit, I think I remember that.
Yeah. Oh. And they were, rated on difficulty, the questions. And I would pretty much, I was aces with it back in the day. I pulled it out, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I was like, oh, geez. No fucking clue. But if I was going to run AD&D, I would run it with Osric as my reference material, because it's so much, the ease of finding stuff in Osric compared to the books we had when we were younger is night and day.
Yep.
Literally night and day.
I have a problem with 5e because it won't burn into my skull. Previous versions will, that it'll get to a spell and I'll be like, oh, hell, what does this do now? Anyone? Can you tell me? Because I'm remembering, Bueller, I'm remembering like 3.5 or 2 or who knows what.
Well, and I understand that. And I mentioned this earlier too. There was my last GaryCon, which I guess was 2019. I had to cover a 5e game. I own the books. I've read them ish, because again, when we were younger, you read them from front to back, and then you went through. And now you get a gaming book, and you flip through it, and you kind of look for stuff that looks like interesting. And I understand this shit. I already know that stuff, and you don't, but you got to go past it. And I was like, "You're kidding me? When does the game start? 5 minutes ago." I'm like, "All right, well, I know the scenario since I've been running it for Swords and Wizardry Light, and I brought my Swords and Wizardry Light."
And so that's what you're playing.
Yeah. Well, I said, listen, your GM got snowed out. This is what we have. I will not be offended if you do not want to participate. I'm just saying this is the option. If you want to play the 5e version, then pretty much somebody's going to have to step up and be the GM. I may be able to explain the scenario, but I'm not going to be able to run shit. And one person, wasn't for them. They walked off, and they picked up. I know somebody else at the halftime, the bathroom halftime. I lost another person, but I picked up 2 before that, so that was fine. But everybody else had a great time. They're like, it was freeing, because sometimes less can be more. I don't know if it always works that way, but I think that if you're used to always having a rule defined with every action you can take, and then you move from that to, so these are the basic rules, and if it's not covered by that, I just tell you what I like to do, and we figure it out from there. Like, pretty much.
My son, when he came to one of these conventions, he was pretty young. He would have been 10, 11. Me and a buddy, we had our sons with us playing in this group, and one of the slots, it was all theater of the mind, some writing on a whiteboard,
right?
And they really enjoyed themselves. And then the next slot, it was all minis. Everybody had their own maps and their minis, and they were doing it all 5-foot steps and everything. And when we were done that, my son was like, "It's way more fun without the minis."
Yes.
I'm like, yes, that's my boy. Perfect. Yeah.
It, it's more immersive. And I think that, again, the idea for me as a player is I can get more immersed in the game the less I have to think about the rules. So if I'm conversant with the rules, obviously I don't have to worry about the rules. I can just play the game and become immersed in the fictional view within my head, which is great. And if I don't know the rules, but the GM is aces with them, they can also fall to the side. My first convention in like 20 years was North Texas, I don't know, 2014. And it was my wife Rachel's first experience role playing outside of One Tunnels and Trolls solo. I put her through, and I had chosen Time Master for her first RPG session because I figured Time Master's been out of print for years. Goblinoid Press had just put it back in print. Tim Schneider, I knew him from online. I think he'd be a great GM. But I want a game where nobody will know the fucking rules. So she's not going to feel strange not knowing them. And only people that knew the rules were Tim, who knew them inside and out, and myself, who kind of remembered some of them. And within the first 20 minutes, my wife is putting some four-armed creature in a half Nelson wrestling hold. And she's like, what do I roll now? I'm like, this is the woman I married? Because she wasn't worrying about the rules. She was worrying about the play and immersed in the play. So that's a good portion of why I like my rules to be minimalistic, which is, again, why something like Tiny D6. When I found Tiny D6, I was like, I could actually see myself playing this. I think Tiny Supers was the first game I found, and I'm a huge fan of comic book movies and superhero movies, and I used to collect comic books, and I hate comic book RPGs with a passion. Never found one that I liked. And Tiny D6, I'm like, I can get this. I can understand this. I could enjoy playing a character.
I was raised on Marvel superheroes when I was a kid, so it's not a great game, but when you're a kid in the 80s, it doesn't matter. Tiny Supers. No. These dice came with the Kickstarter for Tiny Supers. They are fantastic. They got little no's and pows and bams on them. I love these things.
Yeah, I mean,
to the point that they're on my desk.
Alan did a great job with that, and I didn't really expect that much from Tiny D6. I was like, well, it's going to be like what's going to be like Open D6 or like mini Open D6. I mean, again, like the Open D6 is another system that once you understand the basic mechanics, the rules can kind of fall behind. That's the old classic Star Wars system that I grew up on. But Tiny D6, I was like, wow, I could see myself running this for my niece with my wife, and and not have to spend a huge amount of time getting myself ready for it.
I think my favorite of those would be the Mecha and Monsters, because everybody loves giant robots. But the artist, I don't know the artist's name that Alan got for that, but oh my God, it is a beautiful book. It is just fantastic.
I don't have that one. I have Tiny Dungeon. I got the Tiny Supers book, and I backed the Tiny Cthulhu or the Mythos or whatever they called it. And I was like that would be awesome if you can play a horror RPG where character creation is quick and simple yet deep, then you're not too worried about your characters going insane or getting killed, because you can be right back into it. I Call of Cthulhu I used to run, but my players were always like, I have to put too much into creating a character that's only going to be viable for a single session, if that.
I don't understand how people have Call of Cthulhu campaigns. I played a lot of Call of Cthulhu when I was a kid at conventions, and as I understand it, a game should end with one person still alive, crying and laughing, cradling the severed limb of another player, and that's it. That should be the only way.
Pretty much. I mean, the closest thing, like my players would after I ran a couple of Call of Cthulhu's on, like, it was like a yearly Halloween thing. Then my players were like, I don't want to do Call of Cthulhu. I'm like, all right, well, we got Ravenloft now. I guess I could take the characters to Ravenloft, and that was like almost campy horror compared
Yeah.
to Call of Cthulhu.
Yep.
But it wasn't quite the same thing.
I could never
And
get into it. It was a little too
and
blah for me.
and I tried Chill, and Chill was like, well, Chill wasn't very chill. Is that the right way to say it? I don't know.
Let it go. I'm too old to know. That's fine.
That's okay. Not part of my vernacular these days anyway, and it wasn't part of my vernacular back then. So, all right, now we've covered our gaming past and your gaming past. So let's talk about your gaming present. Like, what are you playing these days?
Well, these days, probably a year and a half ago, I guess, I saw on Shut Up and Sit Down, I saw Quinn's did a review of Blades in the Dark, which I had never heard of because I've kind of stepped out of gaming circles a little bit, and so I didn't have my finger on the pulse, and
Right.
and he, I don't know, something about his review. I share a lot of interest with him clearly, and what he was saying just spoke to me. And this review came out almost at the same time as the local convention, where somebody was running Blades in the Dark in every slot, and so I just went to the convention, signed up for every slot of Blades in the Dark, and
nice,
and just played the absolute shit out of it, and loved it. It's a completely different system. It's very narrative based. Like there's a lot on the GM's shoulders for sure. It's tricky to run, but I loved it, and I started running that. And then there's lots of Forged in the Dark, different versions of it because it's open source.
Right.
And I started poking around with those, and I finally made one that you can't sell because it's based off being a Bronze Age comic book Marvel villains, like a group of loser villains in the 80s.
Oh God,
and I made it with Forged in the Dark for my friends, and we had so much fun with this. I mean, a lot of it was the immersion in that era when we were all comic book geeks and whatnot, and it's funny, and it was so good. And again, I mean, I've given parts of it away. I should put the rest of it in the Google Drive just to get it out there because it was so fun. But when right around that time, maybe a year before, I was reading Jack Campbell's. It's a science fiction series called The Lost Fleet, and it's about a fleet of kind of asshole captains lost way beyond enemy lines, and they're trying to make their way back home, and a lot of they've been fighting a war for 100 years, so a lot of military principles and honor and integrity have fallen by the wayside, and they do all of their decision making by council. And it's while I'm reading this, I'm like, this would make a fun game, but the problem is there would be an adversarial nature to it. And I don't know, if you're sitting down for a board game, you know what you're getting into. If it's not a cooperative game, you're there to backstab each other, win, and try to have as much fun as you can doing it. But when you come to a role-playing setting, I don't know if there's something about like your emotional investment in the story and your trust level that makes player versus player problematic often.
Well, I think what it is, especially if you came from our generation of gaming, is that the person that wanted to play the evil assassin usually played them as a complete fucking asshole that was always out there to steal from everybody else or throw somebody. Oh, they've got a room full of giants. Close the door. All right, well then we'll loot the bodies afterwards.
And so we all have stories when we were kids about somebody losing their shit at a game because something like that happened. And
so for my group, we had Paranoia. Everyone, like once every 2 or 3 months, I'd pull out Paranoia for a session or two, allow them to get out their I want to fuck with my fellow friends stuff out of the way for a totally broken system. That was Paranoia First Edition, which was pretty broken.
Fantastically broken, but great. Yeah. That was the one I played. I haven't played any of the other ones, and that was a major influence on the 13th Fleet. Major.
Oh, you just made a sale by saying that. Holy crap!
Well, but, even the art. Late Jim Mordred, like I sort of mimicked his style for a lot of the art in it as well. But the idea of that comedic adversarial nature is 100% the 13th Fleet, for sure.
Well, see, and that's the thing too. If you are going to do backstabbing, and I think that I had first edition, I had second edition Paranoia. I've looked at later editions. They kind of first and second. First was really good for it. Second wasn't as good, but still had some good adventures. But later on, they took away a lot of that adversarial nature to it, which is why it survived. I mean, I still have my box set, and I have all the notes because I would give out like a pack of sticky notes to all my players, and just pass stuff as the game's going on, and I have them all in my box, just as like a memento for the games where, and I'd have brothers screwing with their brother, real life brothers, because it was expected and in game. And I think part of it too is expectations. You come into an AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons game, and it is meant to be cooperative. And if somebody starts fucking with the other players, it is disruptive.
Yep.
But when a game like Paranoia, you come into it with the idea of, after the game is explained to you, it's like, oh, wait a second, we're all troubleshooters, which means we have to turn in traitors, but we are all traitors ourselves.
And that's
fuck.
And that took some work, actually. Like when I was making 13th Fleet, I'm very conscious about it. Instead of having this is a role-playing game and this is what role-playing games are blurb at the beginning, the blurb is, this is sometimes adversarial. You got to be upfront about it. You got to lean into it. You got to have fun with it, because the thing with Blades in the Dark and its beauty is that it's so narrative, and so many of the consequences and so much of the fiction is at the whim of the GM, and that involves a lot of trust, and that had to get broken down. Like there had to be more structure to the 13th Fleet than to Blades in the Dark, so that when something bad is happening to a player, it isn't necessarily just something the GM thought of. It's a set consequence that the GM's adding flavor to. And there's a setting. I mean, the captains, when things go bad, they get stress and it wears them down. And the only way for them to relieve their stress is a phase built into the game where they actually have to backstab each other and cause each other problems. And that being an actual phase of the game, everybody's like they all sort of have a comedic name or description to them, and then the players will take it and run with it. And I think it helps make this environment that, although the comedic stuff like Paranoia and like this, it takes players out of the emotional investment that a lot of serious games would, it's still a really group joined fun experience that once everybody realizes that level of comedy and backstabbing, and they have to work together to get through this campaign alive, but at the same time they can't help themselves but backstab each other along the way.
Right. It's kind of like I'm going to survive, even if it means pushing, stepping on top of, and pushing everybody behind me.
Yeah.
And that is very much in the mindset of Paranoia. I mean, my players never came out of that with a bad thing. They would be thrilled that they survived. Maybe they lost a handful of clones, but they were thrilled they survived to the end, and it wasn't like, oh well, so and so killed Red Box 7. No,
yeah.
Nobody cared, man. At the end,
and I missed that aspect because the captains have a longevity to them. But there's another phase in the game when they go to each enemy system that they're jumping through to try to get home. They have options at these systems to go to the planet. There will be 2 missions that they choose from, and the captains don't go down to the planet. They send their red shirts that are highly expendable and die very easily. And so that's the whole Paranoia clone aspect, where just another one comes up afterwards. And that's been a lot of fun too, because those red shirts, they're made of paper. They're crying like Hudson the whole way through, for sure.
They're gonna get me, man. They're coming, man. Oh god,
Game over.
Game over, dude. Game over. Aliens. Oh man, that was a big quote at my game table too. That was Alien and Aliens were the go-to movies. I think they were probably the first ones any of us owned on VHS. My God, now I'm really dating myself.
Holy shit. Those were fantastic movies. I can remember walking home from the theater thinking, wow, it's pretty dark out.
You wouldn't want one of those face huggers coming out at you now, would
exactly.
you?
No, and again, that was something like Aliens. That plays into a role playing, like a young kid going to see Aliens. You can see characters, you can see plots. It's all part of the same storytelling development that comes part and parcel with all of this. So yeah, so it's no. Obviously, Bill Paxton's lines are gonna be heard all the time, forever, just because of those characters. Somebody wake up, there's tons of lines.
Well, even TSR tried to cash in on that back with the Bug Hunters for Amazing Engine. It's like, hey, let's publish a new role-playing system right before we're gonna get bought out because we're broke.
Yeah.
Oops. There you go. I think I owned all that stuff. That's not. I'm not proud saying that, but there were some good concepts that just had bad rules behind it. But now, is this your first venture into self-publishing?
I've self-published a couple like young adult novels just because I was interested. Like, I live in the middle of Manitoba in Canada. It's not like a creative hub or anything like that. There's some people doing that sort of thing. And I'm not very connected. So maybe 10 or so years ago, I just wanted to write stories like people do. So I shopped them around for a bit, but not to the million publishers you're supposed to, and then just self-published them. And that was it. I did a couple and made enough money to break even and went, cool, now it's family time.
Right.
Don't take too much more time away from that. But this is my first, I mean, over 40 years. Yeah, I've been making rule systems left and right since I was a kid, but this is the first one that, I mean, the Marvel one was so much fun. And then when I started making this, I thought, man, I should really write this up. And then I found out about ZineQuest. And I thought, fantastic. Now the 13th Fleet is a little big for ZineQuest, because although the rules are very simple, I put an entire campaign in there, like a replayable campaign about that structure that I was talking about, so that nobody, and so it's not like a 12 or 20 page zine that's fluff and cool and on to the next one. This thing will be 50 or 60 pages. So but it just came at right around the same time, and it's the amount of investment that I could give as well. I mean, to do a proper soft cover role-playing game and going through publication and all that kind of stuff, that's more time than I have right now. ZineQuest was just the sweet spot of what I could do and what I could give. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Well, and that and ZineQuest, I mean, I've been following ZineQuest, I guess, what is now? This is the third year it's in. I remember the first year, there were maybe a couple of dozen projects, and then last year it increased. And as I said earlier on other interviews, like, I budgeted myself $250, figuring $250 will cover me well for ZineQuest. And then I found that I blew that budget in like by the fourth of the month.
I was shocked to find out about it. Like, when you say zines, I was unfamiliar. For zines, for me, I pulled this out the other day. Kobolds Ate My Baby. That's what I think of when you say zines. That's the only one I've got. But it's all over. I mean, it's gone through punk phases, and now it's just widespread for sure. You can find a little bit of everything in there.
Oh God, yeah, and I mean, I've been following zines in the hobby. Probably the earliest one really was when I wasn't gaming. This goes back to the turn of the century. I think Iron Rations, Christian Walker. Christian still puts out occasionally he'll come back out and he'll put out like a one-page or a single sheet zine to people that have been following this stuff for years, but. Iron Rations was probably 16 to 20 pages, went off like 100 issues. And I mean, it was when you had very little in the way of gaming in your life, to get something that was small press, mailed to your house, that was about different gaming systems. Because at that time too, by 2000, everything was a house organ.
Yeah.
Any magazines you had out there it wasn't like the old Dragon magazine, which covered other games besides just the TSR games, or the old White Dwarf before it became the Warhammer Fantasy Battles house organ.
Yeah.
You could find out about different games in these articles. And now it's like, well, if I want to find out about different games, I got to wire myself in socially. I got to hit sites like N-World or pay more attention on Facebook. It was just nice having it delivered to your house. Just go, So,
and I'm surprised how many people are still interested. I mean, I thought the PDF copies would be way more popular, but no, people still want that physical paper for sure.
They want that physical paper for sure, especially with a product of this size, because this is the size where, you read a little bit in bed and you throw it to the pile on the side, or you use it, you read it in the bathroom, but it's that stuff that you can just intermittently read. It's not like a full-size gaming book where you got to put it back on the shelf when you're done with it. So and it's funny because there's one of the zines that's out there. Actually, I think I'm going to be doing in a fireside later on the week with the creators. It's only in print, and there's an assumption that Tenkar knows all and sees all. I'm the man behind the screen. It's like, do you know if they're going to be putting PDF copies out for this? I'm getting emails. I'm like, and more than one. It's like, oh, I'll ask. But there are some people that are creators that don't want to put out PDF copies, not because, oh my God, PDFs can be stolen. Nobody gives up. If you're in this hobby and you're worried about your stuff being stolen, you're in the wrong hobby.
They're purists. That's what they are.
Yeah, right. They're purists. It's like, I came in, it was only printed material, and that's what I want to put out. But if you're producing something in the States and people in Europe want it, or the UK or Australia, it is damn expensive to mail anything to that. So this is a project that's available only in the States.
Twice as expensive up here, I assure you.
Yeah, I mean,
Canada Post is debilitating.
Yeah, shipping is ridiculously expensive, but at least with Canada Post, if I mail something to you, it doesn't have to go through customs, or have a VAT put on it.
North America's fine. You go international and okay.
Oh yeah. So I was like, I understand why maybe you don't want to put out a PDF, but at the same time, it's like, dude, then just put out a PDF that says it's only available to folks outside of the States, with the implicit instructions that they should print out a copy for themselves. I mean,
I don't know. It was their it's their choice. If they're a purist, if you believe in it, then that's cool. I mean, it's.
I'm always of the type that you want to get your work into the hands of people that want it, and if they're out in Europe and they can't get it delivered because you're only shipping to the States, then I think PDF is an option.
I 100% agree with you. We're back to that spectrum. It's not just crunch versus narrative. It's how you feel about gaming and that sort of thing.
It's funny, like with Frog God Games. For the longest time, Frog God would not do anything that was print on demand, and shipping to Europe, their books were expensive to ship. They're expensive to ship within the States. They're huge, solid books. And Bill Webb's taken some of his products out on his farm. He has a shooting range on his farm, and he's put bullets into these books. They haven't gone through them. So those are decently thick books. And now Frog God is for overseas, has made deals with some print-on-demand houses to do limited print-on-demand for certain titles in Europe or in Australia, New Zealand, because it's more cost-effective for the people that are fans of Frog God and are willing to take a cut in the quality of the product they're going to get to save, the price of shipping, which could be as much or more than the product they're going to order.
Yep.
So,
no, I'm talking about it. I'm like, oh, this sounds like a sales pitch now, but I mean, I understand just the physical aspect, but I mean, we've been playing on Roll20 when we were playtesting this for the last months and months. And although there's charts in the book for consequences and for the backstabbing and whatnot,
Right.
I made cards, like digital cards to use in the game, and they were a lot of fun. And so I felt like I would be remiss unless I didn't have a digital aspect where you could either, like I've got the ones with the space background for playing on Roll20 or whatever as PNGs, but I also made versions that had white backgrounds so they would be more printer friendly, that you could actually print these things off. And so I don't know, every game is different. So if it was all contained within the cover, then I'd be a physical copy only. All right, maybe, but something like this, that like you were talking about, getting it out there and
Yes.
playing it different ways, then I definitely want some digital material to go out as well. So
yeah, and I think digital material it's important. I mean, I'm thrilled that like with Swords and Wizardry Light, Frog God will mail out physical copies for free within the United States. But for a while, I was helping, just out of my affiliate monies, I was helping supplement mailings outside the States. And they'd be like, yeah, we're mailing a 4 pages, literally just a sheet folded. So 2 sheets of thin cardboard to Europe. And it was like, all right, so my share of the shipping is $4.25 if I'm paying half. It's like for something that literally you're giving away free at conventions. And so then it was like, you know what? I guess if you're overseas, you're gonna have PDF, print it out yourself. I don't think that anybody has a problem if you want to make copies of that for yourself. I know that Swords and Wizardry Continua Light, there's a Portuguese version that's distributed for free. I've had questions for a German version of the rules, Portuguese, and I think French. And I've been like, listen, although I charge like, I don't know, $3 for the PDF, I go, if you're going to put out a foreign language for it, and if you put it out for free, do as you will.
yeah,
Because I just wanted to get out there. I don't want to be else profiting off my work, but if you want to share it and give it away for free in your native tongue, that's fine.
cool.
I'm happy with that. Well, sir, this was good, man. This was a lot of fun.
It was.
And I'll tell you the truth. I did the paranoia twist on the 13th Fleet.
Well, it's
man. That is.
It's paranoia for that, but there's also even some junta in there, because whoever's the fleet commander is handing out the rewards that the red shirts get, and if that pisses people off, then they can get rid of the fleet commander. And so there's a lot of old influences pouring into this thing that stuff I loved when I was a kid, and it's there and it works. So
Junta is a game I've yet to hear anybody else throw down as a reference.
I love it. I even one of the cards, one of the backstabbing cards, it's an assassin that's maybe a capable assassin, maybe not a capable assassin. It's like there's a real random aspect to it, and that's totally that's straight from the assassination cards in Junta for sure.
Well, I had my cat. Go ahead.
Well, I love the idea, just like Presidente, what you get when the fleet commander gets all the stuff and is looking at everybody like, oh, whose help do I need coming up? Well, you get this, and you get this, and
who do I play off against who?
Yeah.
Junta. I actually traded my copy for the SPI fantasy game Dragon. Oh God, what was it? It's a male warrior holding like a dragon's head in his hand.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, but I traded it away in high school, and then afterwards I regretted it because it was like, wait a second, this is an RPG, but it's broken down like a war game. I got a reference section 3.5.1.2. Holy crap! But again, looks good. Now, do you have a Patreon or anything like that?
Oh no, nothing like that. I'm just doing it for fun.
Well, all right. Well, folks, if you like cooperative, uncooperative, adversarial RPG environment, which can potentially play out like Paranoia.
Oh, and
But
a lot of Star Trek and Star Wars ripoffs too. Yeah.
anything with red shirts, listen, red shirts, Paranoia reference, and Junta is like the trifecta for me. Okay, I mean that is definitely a selling point. So it is the 13th Fleet. Go to Kickstarter, put it in your search bar. There's a lot
5 days left.
5 days left. There's a lot of zines that are going to be worth your time and money. Don't be like me. Don't say, "Oh, don't." Unless you really need the budget, don't budget. Just dive in and enjoy. It's like Christmas throughout the year as this stuff comes in your mailbox.
There's a lot to choose from, and if you're unsure, I've been putting material in the updates every day that can teach you about the game, and you can make a educated decision on whether or not that's what you want to spend your money on. Because not keeping my cards close to my chest. This is what it's about. There you go.
There you go. Folks, tomorrow at 11 a.m., I've got Lloyd Metcalf. We're going to be talking about his latest zine. I believe that's the Maximum HP. Tomorrow night, talking Crit with Ben, Mike, and myself. We've got Casey Christopherson and his daughter, Catpocalypse. And then 2 more on Thursday, 1 more on Friday, 1 more on Saturday, and whatever else the month brings us. Again, thank you, and
thanks,
again,
sir.
Nathan. Thank you, man. I really do appreciate it.
Cool.
All right. On that note, we are going to be out of here when